Canadian tourists have abandoned the United States in unprecedented numbers, and it's becoming one of the most devastating economic failures of the Trump administration. What started as aggressive tariff threats against America's closest neighbor has spiraled into a tourism catastrophe that's bleeding billions from the U.S. economy. The numbers paint a stark picture of economic devastation. In August alone, Canadian car visits to the U.S. plummeted by 34% compared to the same month last year. This isn't just a temporary dip, it's the 8th consecutive month of steep declines, with visits to the United States from Canada down 25.2% year-to-date, including a 37% year-over-year drop in arrivals by car in July. Air travel from Canada has also collapsed, with 1/4 fewer Canadians visiting the U.S. this year compared to the same period in 2024. To grasp the magnitude of this crisis, consider that last year, 20 million Canadians visited the U.S., over 1/4 of all tourists who come here. According to the U.S. Travel Association, Canadians are the largest group of foreign visitors to the U.S. They've been America's most reliable tourism partners for decades, spending billions of dollars annually in destinations from Florida to California to New York. But let's examine what's driving this unprecedented boycott of American tourism.
Carney being ahead by like 20 points. And I think that's the real story. For Pierre Poilievre, he has to start to build his personal brand to be more competitive with Mark Carney because Pierre Poilievre is trailing his own party.
How do issues factor into it? Because there's a lot of conversation right now happening. I know at caucus that they're gathered in Edmonton, at cabinet last week in North York, about like, what do Canadians care about? Have they become somewhat insulated from the ups and downs of Trump and able to focus on other big issues? For example, the prospect of losing their job, or inflation, or crime, or immigration? Or are they still fixated on the Trump issue? What does your data show you about that?
In our weekly tracking on the top national issue of concern, focus on Trump and U.S. relations is still the top issue. But the interesting thing, Vashi, is when you look at the top 4, they're all directly or indirectly pocketbook issues. So top Trump and trade, jobs and the economy. Then you have kind of inflation, the cost of housing. So think of Canadians worried about paying for the bills. Think of Canadians worried about their jobs, wondering what will happen in the next 6 months, wondering what will happen with the trade relationship. So there's a certain level or a high level of anxiety that's underpinning a lot of those views right now. And, you know, for the Liberals, they've really got to start to deliver, because how long will Canadians wait to transition from the Liberals talking about things to delivering on some of the promises that they have?
The relationship between these two nations, once characterized by mutual respect and cooperation, has fundamentally shifted. Political analysts have noted how working-class Canadians who might have previously considered visiting the United States are now actively avoiding travel south of the border, driven by a combination of economic anxiety and political tensions. Trump's tariff policies have become a defining feature of his presidency.
Well, this is, again, the president going through these emergency proceedings, and the court took this case up really, really fast. And we have to recognize that Donald Trump is on a massive win streak with these emergency docket cases going before the Supreme Court. In fact, he's won 17 of 23, and we know one is still pending. And a ruling just came down recently. So if this case is any indication of what we can expect in terms of success or failure, the president has a very good chance of actually getting a verdict in his favor in this case. And to be clear, if you compare what Donald Trump has done going through emergency dockets to get the case, to take these cases up quickly versus, say, what the last administration did, Donald Trump has brought more emergency docket cases than the Biden administration did in the entire 4 years. Donald Trump has brought more in the first 7 months in office than the Biden administration did in.
Legal experts and political analysts have observed how his administration has pushed executive authority boundaries in ways previous presidents never attempted, with these aggressive trade policies creating ripple effects throughout the North American economy. Shortly after taking office in January, Trump said he would impose 25% tariffs on many Canadian goods and repeated his wish to turn the country into the 51st U.S. state. The reaction from Canadians was swift and decisive. An Ipsos poll for Global News released in early February, after Trump had announced the tariffs, found that 68% of residents surveyed thought less of their southern neighbor. The boycott runs deeper than economics. It's profoundly personal. The anger is not with the American people. The anger is with Donald Trump, said Lorna Hunt, CEO of tour company Great Canadian Holidays. And the feeling is that if he is going to go to war with Canada, something we never asked for, an economic war, then why on earth would they spend a nickel in the United States when they don't have to? Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau actively encouraged this economic retaliation. In early February, Trudeau encouraged Canadians to spend their money domestically in response to the U.S. tariffs, saying, "It might mean changing your summer vacation plans to stay here in Canada and explore the many national and provincial parks, historical sites, and tourist destinations our great country has to offer." American businesses are already experiencing devastating consequences. A Seattle tour operator who runs Seattle free walking tours said Canadian tourists are almost gone, with Canadians calling to cancel their tours, explicitly telling him it was because of the policies and the behavior of our current president. As a result of seeing 30% fewer customers this year overall, he has been paying his employees, but not himself. This is also the first year since he took over the tour company in 2021 that he has had to put his own savings into the business to keep it afloat. The economic pain extends across the entire country. In North Dakota, the Department of Commerce estimates that Canadian visitors spent roughly $14.4 million less in the first 6 months of 2025 than they did over the same time period last year. A duty-free shop owner in Quebec says Canadian business is down close to 50%, while at Hill Farmstead Brewery, business is off by a third, with 50 or 60 of the ticket holders from a large festival simply not showing up. Las Vegas, which received 1.4 million Canadian visitors last year, making them the largest source of international visitors, has been hit particularly hard. The city even sent a delegation to Vancouver trying to win back travelers. Steve Hill, CEO of the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, admitted, "A portion of our friends in Canada are not happy with us right now. We want them to come back, but we understand they may not be ready to do that." The broader economic implications are staggering. International visitor spending in the U.S. is projected to fall below $169 billion this year, down from $181 billion in 2024. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, spending by overseas visitors in 2025 will fall 7% to less than $169 billion. Of the 184 economies the WTTC tracks, the U.S. is the only one expected to see tourism revenue decline this year. The projected economic loss reaches up to $29 billion compared to what tourism officials expected at the beginning of the year. This represents a complete reversal from earlier projections. Before Trump took office, analysts expected 2025 to be a bumper year for U.S. tourism, with almost 79 million foreign visitors, approaching pre-pandemic levels. Instead, travel research firm Tariff Economics predicted that the U.S. would see 8.2% fewer international arrivals in 2025. What makes this particularly damaging is that the decline isn't limited to Canadians. Trump's policies have prompted a travel boycott from Canadians, the largest group of visitors, and anti-American sentiment is on the rise in Europe. Air France, British Airways, and Lufthansa are all cutting flights to destinations such as Atlanta, Las Vegas, Miami, and New York. Desperate American tourism officials have launched unprecedented campaigns to try to win back Canadian visitors. Meet Boston is planning winter campaigns and media missions to Mexico, the United Kingdom, and most notably, Canada. Visit California sweetened its California Loves Canada campaign with discounts of up to 25% off hotels, active IDs, and attractions. The governors of 6 northeastern states sent formal letters to Canadian provincial premiers expressing concern over the drop in Canadian travel. Maine installed special Bienvenue Canadien welcome signs near the border, while Palm Springs installed 40 large heart-shaped Canadian flag banners along Palm Canyon Drive. Yet these desperate gestures aren't working. The fundamental problem isn't marketing, it's Trump's hostile approach toward Canada. As Canadian Julie Morrison explained, this threat of annexation by this very powerful militarized ally, we took it very, very seriously, and honestly, it's frightening. The tariffs themselves create additional barriers beyond the boycott sentiment. A brewery owner explained that someone buying beer from us just coming for the day, they will pay not just the provincial tax, but they will now pay a 25% additional tariff. They're paying 43% above cost to bring beer back. Trump's administration has also added new fees that make visiting the U.S. more expensive. A new $250 visa integrity fee, set to go into effect on October 1st, adds a hurdle for travelers from non-visa waiver countries like Mexico, Argentina, India, Brazil, and China. The extra charge raises the total visa cost to $442, one of the highest visitor fees in the world. The irony is striking. While Canadian tourism to the U.S. has collapsed, American tourism to Canada has remained relatively stable. In a major U-turn, more U.S. residents drove into Canada in June and July than Canadians made the reverse trip, according to Canada's National Statistical Agency. Statistics Canada stated that this was the first time this had occurred in nearly 2 decades, except for 2 months during the pandemic. This represents a fundamental shift in North American tourism patterns. Canadians are actively seeking alternatives to American trade and tourism.
Actually, what we're seeing is that Canadians are increasingly wanting to see the number of either new individuals brought into the country or temporary foreign workers to be actually diminished. And you can see that 7 out of every 10 Canadians would like to see the numbers reduced. This doesn't mean that they're against immigration. I think this is more about right-sizing or calibrating kind of the number of new Canadians that we need. But, I think in an environment where people are worried about their job, they're worried about the economy, they're wondering what the future has in store, that the appetite for more immigration is much more tempered than it has been in the past, and people would like to see things kind of adjusted.
It's interesting that you delineate between, we're against immigration as a concept versus, we would like to see more adjudication over it, essentially.
Yeah, and the thing is I always look at it in terms of kind of...
The data shows a dramatic change in Canadian attitudes, with support for increased trade with other nations jumping significantly as they look to diversify their economic relationships beyond the United States. According to a poll released by the market research firm Leger, nearly half of Canadians surveyed said they were less likely to travel to the U.S. this year. Most of them said they plan to travel within Canada instead. Canadians are increasingly choosing alternative destinations like Mexico and the Caribbean, reshaping North American tourism flows. The damage extends beyond individual businesses to entire regional economies. Canadian B, border crossings into New York decreased by over 21% in June 2025, compared to June 2024. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blamed Trump's impulsive, ill-conceived trade war for the decline in tourism and employment in upstate New York. The tourism industry, which contributed over $1.9 trillion to the U.S. economy in 2023, relies heavily on foreign spending, especially from high-value travelers in Canada, China, Germany, and the UK. Now it faces an unprecedented crisis. Airbnb, Booking.com, and Expedia have all cautioned that their financial results will be weaker than expected because of softening demand in the U.S. What's particularly striking is how quickly this relationship deteriorated. Canada has historically been one of America's most reliable allies and trading partners. Canada has historically been one of the United States' strongest tourism allies. But relations have chilled significantly following President Trump's re-election and renewed tariff threats. After securing another term, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney declared that the old relationship of integration with the U.S. was over, referencing a shift away from close tourism and trade ties. The data shows this isn't a temporary political gesture, it's a sustained economic response. According to aviation data provider OAG, advanced bookings for flights between Canada and the U.S. from April to September 2025 have plunged by over 70% compared to the same period last year. Car crossings to America dropped by 33% in June. That's the 6th consecutive month of decline. Air travel has also plummeted. Trump's defenders might argue that tourism will eventually recover, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Tourism Economics noted that airline bookings indicate the sharp inbound travel slowdown of May, June, and July would likely persist in the months ahead, with the sentiment drag proving to be severe. The World Travel and Tourism Council says tourism revenue won't return to its pre-COVID-19 level before 2030. This isn't just about lost revenue, it's about damaged relationships that will take years to rebuild. Market research firm Longwoods International president Amir Ilan explained that Canadians were already concerned over their personal finances, but they've taken the rhetoric and policy announcements from the U.S. administration very personally. Experts say Trump's tariffs, immigration crackdown, and repeated jabs about the U.S. acquiring Canada and Greenland have alienated travelers, with economist Ryan Bourne noting the decline can be put down to the president's trade wars and some of the fallout about fears about getting ensnared in immigration enforcement. The most damaging as pecked may be Trump's repeated suggestions about annexing Canada. Trump has repeatedly stated, frankly, Canada should be the 51st state, comments that have deeply offended Canadians and fueled the boycott movement. This isn't just about trade policy, it's about respect for sovereignty and national identity. As American businesses struggle with the consequences of Trump's failed approach to Canada, the lesson is clear. Aggressive rhetoric and hostile policies toward allies have real economic consequences. The $29 billion tourism loss represents one of the most spectacular policy failures of Trump's presidency, turning America's closest neighbor and most reliable tourism partner into an economic adversary. The irony is that while Trump claimed his tariffs would help American businesses, they've actually devastated one of America's most successful industries. The tourism sector, which had been recovering strongly from the pandemic, is now facing a crisis entirely of Trump's making. From Seattle tour operators to Las Vegas casinos to Maine border towns, American businesses are paying the price for Trump's diplomatic failures. This isn't just a temporary political disagreement, it's a fundamental shift in North American economic relationships. As Canadians increasingly look to other destinations for their vacation dollars and American tourism businesses struggle to survive, Trump's tariff war with Canada stands as a monument to how quickly destructive policies can unravel decades of successful cooperation. The $29 billion loss is just the beginning of what could be a much longer and more costly economic separation between two nations that had been the closest of allies.